Good evening to all the viewers of Mint. I am Karuna Kumar, joined by Anil Padmanabhan in the studio. We are doing yet another edition of Editor's Take, and in today's edition, we're going to talk about the recently released foreign trade figures. So Anil, thanks again for joining me on this show. So the figures are out. What is your thought on that?
See, Karuna, it depends on which way you look at it. There are two contrasting stories that are coming out. They're just 2 months of data, April and May. But if you look to the dollar numbers, the cumulative exports and imports tell you a different story, which is basically very conservative, and that they're contracting, that exports are contracting, and so are imports. But if we flip and look at the rupee value of these trade numbers, they show pretty comforting numbers of double-digit growth of exports around 16% and actually an positive import growth. So it depends on which way you look at it, through which currency. You get a different story altogether.
That's very interesting. So you're saying that when you look at it from dollar terms, the story looks different, and you look at it from the rupee terms, it looks very different. Two divergent trends. What do you think is causing this?
Answer is simple, the rupee. So if you looked at the April numbers, this distortion is not so significant, but the May numbers bring this through. So if around ballpark figure, I think around end April, the rupee was about 50 and it dropped to about 55, 56 by the end of May. So if you see the steep depreciation of about 15-20% of the rupee, it has contributed to this kind of exaggeration of export growth in rupee terms and import growth in rupee terms. So the answer to this kind of enigma, as it were, is the rupee.
So a very obvious question then, what sort of impact does this have on the economy?
See, what it does is that when a rupee depreciates against the dollar, in this case the dollar, it makes your exports cheaper, so it makes it more competitive internationally. At the same time, it makes your imports costlier. So it acts like an impediment to imports, additional imports. But this is in theory. What it doesn't assume is that the same export markets exist and that imports are not clunky. About 70 to 80% of India's imports are made up of either oil or gold. They are pretty price inelastic. So you don't have this flexibility that can come in with price movements in rupee terms going up or down.
Now, given a situation where our traditional export markets like the US and UK are an all-time low, do you anticipate any change at all in these dismal figures?
See, that's a great point, because exactly like I said, in theory, this is how it works. It makes your exports cheaper and imports costlier. So it actually should add to your trade deficit. It should either reduce it or give you a bigger trade surplus, that is exports minus imports. But in the real world out there, we know there's a global crisis in the making. Europe is on the brink, though it has pulled back at the last minute. The US is a slowing economy. China is slowing. So worldwide, everybody is slowing. So export markets are shrinking. They're not contracting at this, but they're shrinking at this point of time. Whereas the imports, like I said, are very clunky. So at this point, you're getting relief because international oil prices have dropped from 120 to about $90, the kind of brand of oil that India imports. But going forward, it is an yes and no. If this situation persists, yes, excellent news. But if it doesn't, as we know it can, then it's bad news.
So the trade figures clearly mean different things for different people. Thank you so much, Anil, for being on this show. I think that's all we have in this edition. Thanks for watching.